Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Mission Off the Cuff. Today we have another fun review for you from Marc and Sons out of Germany. A little bit about the brand. They were established back in 2007. They are a micro brand that feature many different types of styles, and also their particular styles feature many different types of automatic movements. This particular watch, if you couldn't tell already, is a dive watch, and when it comes to kind of key features and common design language, when you're looking at a dive watch, you're going to look for something that, of course, has water resistance, normally through some type of screw-down crown, and of course, seals and gasket use. You're going to want something tough, very legible. Also, dive time bezel is always nice, as well as if you have a bracelet, it is always a nice feature to have a diver's extension. Now this particular model is brand new for 2017. It is a refresh of a previous model, but the particular nomenclature of this one is the MSD-028-10. It retails for right around 420 US dollars, and it is extremely capable. And although you haven't seen my wrist yet in this shot with the watch, I'm sure you can already tell this is quite a large watch. Now this thing is a beefy tool diver. There's really no other way to put it. It is definitely the largest watch I've ever featured on the channel and is much larger than I would normally wear. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and pick this guy up and get into those specs. Okay, one thing to note is that I do have this on a Hirsch Extreme rubber strap. As opposed to on the bracelet. I feel like the bracelet, although definitely suffices, and we'll get into the specs on the bracelet here later on in the episode. I just feel like, you know, it's just a little vanilla, and for something big and beefy, a piece such as this, I think it definitely warrants, you know, a little pop of color and in design as well to really go with this kind of very bold statement of a tool watch. So the case size is actually 46 millimeters in diameter with a 55 lug to lug, and although the lugs do taper down, which is definitely nice, especially since it does have the longer lug to lug, that still is quite a beefy watch. It is actually 17.7 millimeters thick, so I mean this thing is as thick as many chronographs, so this is definitely a thick piece. It is, of course, made out of 316L stainless steel. It has a sapphire crystal with inner AR coating there, so it does appear very clear when you look at it. So you can see there's not much reflection, even with the studio lights here. So that's definitely nice and well executed. The bezel is a really nice bezel here. Oh, interesting. Huh. Definitely interesting clicks on the bezel. Normally, right, is 60 clicks, right, is 1 for each minute. And if you have 2 for each minute, that would be 120 clicks. This bezel seems to be about 8 clicks, or maybe it's a half click for 5. So I guess that would roughly make this a 96 click bezel. Definitely interesting choice, but you know, at the end of the day, it's solid action there. There is a little bit of back play, but nothing crazy. But it does have a nice smooth action to it. And of course, when you're actually timing something, it's not like you're counting the clicks anyway. The clicks are basically just kind of stoppers, and if you need to make a small adjustment, you can tune that in nice and precisely. But I'll let you guys get a little listen there to the bezel action. Okay. Of course, we have crown here is actually down by the 4 o'clock, and then we have up by the 3, actually the 2 o'clock, sorry about that, is actually a manual helium escape valve. So definitely interesting on that side. And I think, you know, if I imagine the watch without it, I don't know. I think actually because of the size of the crown, it does appear visually better, I think, with the crown versus without it. Although, you know, it's still definitely a very interesting choice as far as, you know, versus the kind of more integrated helium escape valves that we've seen in kind of newer models. Now, the movement inside is the NH35 hacking in hand windable Seiko instruments movement, which is basically just an unbranded Seiko 4R36 movement, actually, or 4R35, because as well, you can't really tell now because the hands are covering, but basically it's just the date. So if it's just date, it'll be the 35 nomenclature, and then if it's day date, it'll be 36, but basically the same movement. The case back is solid and etched, as you can see there. It does have very minimal kind of information there, but definitely good stuff to have. And then we turn it around to this side here. We have that beautiful gradient black to blue dial. Definitely, you can tell that these are nicely done applied indices. Let me see if I can get it close. Keep it in focus. So really nicely done. Almost one of the nice things about a big watch is I can get it very close. You can get a good look, and it's not blurring yet because it's looking bigger without being as close to the lens. So, as you can see, very cool dial layout. Of course, very reminiscent of the Rolex Submariner, but instead of at the 12 o'clock, seeing that kind of very trademark triangle, you see kind of another baton indice or stick indice, however you want to call it. Now, it does have the date complication at 3 o'clock, which is kind of being covered there by the minutes hand, and then the hands themselves are polished, and then this, except for the seconds hand there, as you can see, is a very nice pop of color with the orange, which I've paired with this really great and robust strap from Hirsch. Definitely one of the bigger players as far as the aftermarket strap ranges go, because Hirsch actually makes a lot of OEM straps for a lot of the watchmakers out there. So, a little fun fact. Now, the Luminova used here is very, very potent. It is BGW9, which is a great lume, and it is applied, you know, in droves. I mean, this is very thick, and when we get to the lume shot, I think you guys will be very impressed with what this has to offer. Now, as far as water resistance goes, if you were taking a really close look at the case back earlier, you would see that it actually has 100 atmospheres or 1,000 meters, as well as, you know, of course it says it on the dial there. But one thing to mention, yes, this goes very deep, deeper than really a human in a wetsuit could ever really dive. But you know, it's that kind of overbuilt aspect, I think, that really is what's going to draw people to this watch. Now, is it? Of course, it is quite a large watch, and you know, honestly, these watches sell themselves. They don't really even need to be marketed much. It's really more so, I think, the more traditional sizes that people look for. They're more connoisseurs, but I think the more casual wear, you know, I feel like those kind of larger watch trends are still very popular. I stopped by the IWC boutique today, and you know, they showed me this huge pilot's watch. I mean, it was really, it dwarfed the chronograph that I was wearing. So bigger watches are still definitely in style. So not to worry there. You know, we've definitely showcased a lot of more traditionally sized watches in the 38 and 40 range. So I think it's only fair that we showcase a larger watch every once in a while, especially if it is larger with some justification. And in this case, being a 1,000 meter water resistant mass produced watch, I think it is definitely understandable why it would be this size, considering the overbuilt nature of the watch. Now the lugs, here or in between here, the strap width basically is 22 millimeters. So definitely, you know, a nice change of pace. You would think for something this size they would have went with a 24 millimeter lug, but the 22 makes it so now you can switch it out with many of the straps that you would normally keep for your Seikos, or you know, some more common dive watches will actually fit on here too, which is definitely very, very nice. As far as this bracelet goes, let's go ahead and get that back up here before we pull it off camera. It's, you know, a pretty standard affair. It has friction pins, but it does have solid end links. Were really nicely done. Of course, solid links. Really, you know, pretty standard diver's clasp here. The stamped metal, also stamped clasp, but still definitely done to a, you know, a pretty nice finish there. That's something you would see on, you know, like an Orient. So very nicely done. Oh, let me make sure it's focused there. As you can see, and definitely does the job. But again, I think, you know, considering the mass of the watch, you know, you can kind of give you an idea. You can imagine what it looks like on the bracelet. I feel like it just does a little bit better with a little bit more contrast. I think it really brings out the personality of this particular watch. And let's go ahead and zoom in now for a pretty bold lume shot. I think you guys are gonna really, for all the lume junkies out there, I think you're really gonna enjoy this piece because it just blasts lume. So let me just give it a quick charge here, this BGW9. Thirsting for some light there. And let's hit the lights. And as you can see, very bright, you know, very high definition, basically. Well done lume. You can see the second hand there. Everything is very, very legible. And, you know, there's really not much to complain about. I think it was definitely nice for them to choose BGW9. I know normally it's kind of the go-to lume for some more higher end brands. Really what you kind of expect to see in the, you know, kind of entry level divers, especially for micro brands, you're going to expect kind of that bright C3, which is really great, but when it's lit kind of in daylight, it definitely has more of a green tint to it. The nice thing about this is, although it's you know, shining very brightly blue now, when it's in pure daylight or, you know, regular, you know, outside conditions, you don't have to worry about that tint to it. This looks very clean and very white still. So I think that's definitely really cool and really well done. And of course, something that I appreciate about this particular lume on any watch, let alone just this particular model. Now, you know, I guess we should probably get this on the wrist here. Let me zoom out and get this on my 7 1/4 inch wrist. So, you know, I'd say I probably have a slightly above average wrist. By no means do I have a small wrist, but, you know, I'd say probably the average is closer to 7 inches. I'm a little bit over that, so I will consider my wrist a bit above average. Now, of course, it's a little harder for me to get this going with the glove on. So let me just get this going here. Cool. Alrighty. So really great quality on this rubber. It's very soft, but it has kind of a finish to it that makes it much less porous. So it actually has a really nice, I guess, like a look and a feel, the sheen to it. It definitely is brighter and has more of a gloss to it versus, you know, some of the more loose matted looks. And as you can see, of course, up close wristy, this thing is huge, right? But it you know, it actually fits though on the wrist, which is pretty crazy. And does have a lot to do with those turn down lugs, as you can see. I think a little farther out, you know, maybe hand opened. The proportions are a little bit different, but you know, honestly, this definitely is something that you know, it's begging to be taken into the water. Now, this is definitely a fun, robust piece that you can take, bang around. I mean, especially with that ceramic insert there. If I didn't already mention that, it has, you know, of course, sapphire plus ceramic plus 1,000 meters water resistant. This thing really has a lot to offer as far as toughness goes. You can see that profile there. You know, it's tall, but I think because it's also large, you know, diameter wise, the height doesn't seem too, you know, I guess too tall or bulbous. I think, of course, it is still a large watch, but proportionally, I think that the, you know, the numbers are pretty decent as far as the proportions go, which helps the watch just to appear a little bit nicer on the wrist. There are some watches you'll see that aren't really that big, that look much larger, just kind of because of the way the proportions are. I think this one has a decent balance. So, you know, if you shrunk this down, let's say, a couple of millimeters, I think the proportions will still play well, versus sometimes you blow a design up and it just doesn't play as well. I think this kind of is the opposite there. I think this will still look good, even just because I think the proportions are just very well balanced. Now, you know, on the wrist, this thing is chunky. You know, what can I say? It feels good though, and it's not uncomfortable. I think it's definitely, you know, they were pretty smart with the way they did the case back there, kind of that slight bubble back case back, so it's, you know, still very comfortable to flex your wrist and everything. And then, you know, I guess when you think about it, you know, kind of the bottom line is it's a great value for money. At, you know, just under $450, you get a ceramic bezel, BGW9 lume, 1,000 meters water resistant, you know, a sapphire crystal, solid bracelet, and it's, you know, all made in Germany. So it's extremely feature rich at a very, you know, and I guess the only kind of trade-off is that, you know, it is at the cost of kind of design originality, right? It's definitely kind of a mishmash of a couple of different designs, you know, good ones, don't get me wrong. It has design elements that have lasted the test of time for a reason, because they look good and, you know, people enjoy them. So I think this will be a good seller for Marc and Sons. As far as model variants go, there's definitely various color combinations that you can check out on their site. And then comparable models, you know, there are definitely a lot of kind of big, chunky 1,000 meter divers in the micro kind of range. But, you know, there are really none that are competing at this price point. A lot of those watches, those are kind of the halo watch for that brand. This one, I mean, this is kind of one of the mid kind of entry watches for Marc and Sons. There are watches that are going to be cheaper, but there are probably going to be watches that are a little bit more expensive. So it's definitely interesting that they were able to kind of price something that's so feature rich and such a very competitive spot as far as the pricing goes. And of course, you know, if you're not interested in something this big, it really doesn't even matter to you what it costs. So go ahead and save those comments from adding on the comments below. But you know, it is what it is. As far as, you know, I guess my final thoughts, you know, it's a large and capable diver, you know, with a large demographic of consumers who love large divers. So these watches are made because they keep selling. So, you know, I think people who buy these, you know, a watch this big, this size, are going to continue to buy them regardless of my review or not. But I think they're probably going to enjoy seeing this thing in the flesh and on a great rubber dive strap before they purchase. So thanks, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please do hit like and subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks.